and welcome to another video. This is Kevin, also known as AKAAWOL. And today I am starting my project with these. I bought what I thought was supposed to be popsicle sticks, but they're obviously too wide for that and too small to be a tongue depressor, so I'm really not sure what I got. You can see that I created a little template and put marks on it so that way the sizes didn't get out of control. And just used a little box cutter to be able to cut them down to size. Now, as far as the template thing goes, basically what that is because if you cut one and then use the one that you just created, and then cut another, and then use that one, you'll eventually allow it to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that would not have worked well at all. So by just putting some markers on the ones, in fact, I still have them. I didn't even use them in the whole build. I was able to keep it all pretty even. I'm just using this regular plain old school white glue kind of stuff thing that you would give kids, and it turned out really great. I mean, I was really actually surprised at the end of it. It felt like the whole thing became one solid block of wood, and basically because I really lack tools here, this was really my only method I had available to me to make something like this for myself. So, and this is strictly for myself. This is, and yeah, you can kind of see it's a bit uneven, but I own a Dremel, so I wasn't too worried about that. I mean, if you didn't have a Dremel, you could just use a file. So, okay, so first we're just gonna pick a color. Looks like it'll be yellow, and unravel it off the little plastic spool. I will then find its middle, kind of happening a little bit off camera there. Find the middle. Going to bring that back just a little bit, so that's here. I'm going to clamp this onto the board carefully. Okay, and I'm going to clamp the other side over here. There. So that's the string I'm working off of. Next, just pick a color. Unravel it as well. See, this is why I put it onto these little things. If I actually had to go and cut the string up to do something like that, it would take me time. I'd have to get up. I'd have to whatever. It's just so much easier. Okay. So slide it underneath, and then I pull it through. That was the middle, by the way, of this one. Okay. Just grab another color. Trying to be random about it. Trying not to play any kind of favoritism. I'm trying to go for that random look again. So, yeah, that's kind of the theme here lately, I know. But that's it's all part of this. So, okay, the next one. Okay. And let's do another one just to kind of get this going before I move on to what's going to really make this thing work. So, hang on, let's find the center of this. Under and through. Okay, now one of these browns is going to go over top of one of the reds. Okay. And at this point I kind of have to use some caution. Don't want to start off on the wrong note, so to speak. Alright, now this blue can go over the top of the other brown. and then over the red that the brown had gone onto. At this point it's too small to have gone all random or anything on it, right? So there's no sense in trying any of that just yet. Now, this is just some scrap from that previous green bag. And what we're going to do is we're going to unclip this. And we're going to pull the yellow through that green. I'm going to hold that there. Clip this down nice and tight. Now, see how if I hold this, it basically keeps this part here straight. Okay, so we really need that. I'm gonna kind of clip the yellow down for a second, just because I don't have enough hands. So that's sort of there. Let's get these up from underneath. Now, the first one would have been this red. Alright. So this red's going to tie to this yellow. So now I can unclip it. Grab hold of that yellow. Draw it in nice and snug. And, whoops. Tie that red on there. That's where we're going to pull it nice and snug. Oops, where I got caught. Okay, so the red can come down. This brown will as well. And you can see how the counterpart of each one of these colors, so that other brown is coming off this way, the other blue is coming off this way. So you're only using the one strand of each of these. So every time you add a strand, it sort of half goes one way, half goes the other way. And this will help because you want it to be where the you don't want all your colors like right next to each other or whatever. So that's, you're trying to create this really fun randomy sort of effect. You don't want like everything at once. You're not going to be able to avoid it with the last couple colors over here, but you'll see how that turns out here momentarily. So now I'm going to switch over to the time lapse. I'm going to keep adding the string, and I'm going to use the randomizer. Now this time I'm going to set the randomizer to 0 through 5, which if you're using a 6-sided dice, that would be, you would normally have 1 to 6, you just subtract 1 from off of everything, and I will show you how that works here in just a moment. Okay, so as I was saying, I set the randomizer 0 to 5, which would be just like dice, right? Still having the spread of 6 numbers, right? But what I'm doing here is I'm bringing the string across for whatever the number was that came up. So if it was like 2, 3, 5, I do 2 knots, bring one over towards the left over top of that, do 3 knots, do 1 to the left, and then do 5 knots to the left. The 0 is the wild card that sort of makes it fun. So let's say it's 3, 0, 5. So I do my 3 to the right, and then I do my 1 to the left, and then I have that 0. So I do another 1 to the left, and then I do the 5, and then 1 to the left. And that way it's random, and it adds a little bit more to it. And that's why so many people, when I shared the image, were trying to figure out what was kind of going on there. Was there a pattern involved? What was it? Because it does give that appearance of random, but there seems to be something deeper, more whatever going on in the whole thing. And that's where it came from. That was the whole gist of it. The whole reason I changed up this random from the previous ones I was doing on the bags is because this is a flat piece. And what I discovered about the flat pieces, especially like making a bracelet, excuse me, was that with the flat bracelet, I was, when you get to the very end, when you get to the far right side, some of the colors stay there because they start working themselves back across, but then they come down again, and it's just so much of that one color over at that one side. When it's in a cylinder, there's far less of that. Everything is constantly on the move. Everything's in that constant state of rotation. So I wanted something that would kind of keep the colors kind of moving along and whatever. So essentially all this is a candy stripe with the occasional break in it, something going off to the opposite direction. So if you prefer your candy stripes going to the left, you could still do this with the occasional right coming through. It's relatively simple. And you can see here, when I first started out, I was taking every row all the way down to the edge, and that was working fine. The only thing there was, I wanted to get to where all the string was off my desk and up onto the board and working and kind of have my space back again. So I decided to kind of find an area to work towards, and this is how that turned out. By having the strings again all spun around the little bobbins, that kind of made that nice and easy. I didn't have to do anything cutting wise or whatever. And these were just a lot of like colors that I picked out of what was in my bins already. So maybe I used some of this in previous projects, or most likely it was that. Because oftentimes, I double up my string for my bracelets. So if I'm using 2/3 on a bracelet, that leaves me 1/3 that goes into the casings. So, and I have at least 2 bins full of that. And occasionally I like to make a thin bracelet, or in this case, something much, much, much bigger. There's 48 strings. There's 48 bobbins. But when you do that lark's head at the top and you let it come down, you're essentially doubling the number of strings. So if you count your strings, like how many you're actually tying, there'd be 96. And I did that because I wanted the overall thing to be, I think it was 10 cm. Pretty sure it was 10 cm. 110. No, not 110. 11 cm or 110 millimeters. Whew. Okay. And I was able to actually figure that out in advance based off of other smaller bracelets. If you know how much string goes into, like before I was doing those 24s, right? That ended up being approximately, with 24 strings, ends up being 1 inch. 110 millimeters is just over 4 1/4 inches. So I knew that basically 100 strings would land me out there. Went with the 96 just to kind of bring it in just a little bit. Came up perfect because there's a lot more joins. And I did it to where when you do the lark's head, you're tying the right-handed one to the left-handed side of the previous string that you attached. So, you can see I used one of the scrap pieces of wood. As I was getting closer and closer to the clip, it was increasingly more difficult to get the strings to go up underneath that yellow one. And so I used a piece of the popsicle stick or whatever that is to prop it up a little bit, and that way I could slip that underneath there. You can see I have some deep gouges in my board now. That was from the last video when I clipped the board onto my easel. Unfortunately, by clamping it down, I actually put those big gouges into my board, which kind of bums me out just a little bit. So you can see I needed to bring the yellow across. Once I kind of got it across the purple, then I held the purple down just to kind of keep things held nicely in place. That only lasts for a moment. It was just about trying to get that side really nice and squared off there. Once I kind of got to this point, yeah, it was pretty exciting. I was looking at the possibility of how, yeah, here we go. The Dremel. I wanted to smooth it out a bit. I wanted to make sure that the glue and everything was going to hold. So yeah, I went to do this. Back to the bracelet part. That was, I was kind of getting excited at the notion that it was so far along, and at that point, I think the progress really kind of started speeding up because I could see like light at the end of the tunnel, and you know, I think that's a big part in a creator's thing, is trying to get to that point. Unfortunately, I wanted to use, there's a wand for the Dremel it came with that would have made this a whole lot easier, but apparently before, I don't know what I was doing, but I think I melted the little grippy thing that lets you use the tools, but there it is. I kind of smoothed it out. I end up having to use a file afterwards because that little ledge there wasn't as flat as I needed it to be. But other than that, this is all I did. And that's what that looked like. So back to this. I chugged along for quite a while, got it down. Oh, let's see, how far was that? That was, I have a ruler here and the template that I had worked with. About 110 millimeters down, so 11 cm down. I decided to try this, which this is essentially just going one knot to the right, get all the way to the end, then it's one knot to the left, you know, going up back the other direction. And that is how you make the plaid type fabrics. But what I discovered later on is that the plaid really shows up a lot more when you have groups of colors together. So when you think of like a plaid skirt or something, you know, or a kilt, you imagine like that white stripe coming through, and then it hits where another color, and at that point it breaks it up. I kind of wanted this one little stripe, and in order to do this, by the way, what I had to do was I had to bring everything down and then like leave off two, and then bring the next row down and leave off two. I had to get that nice straight row. And you can see here I'm having to add an extra knot because I missed something somewhere along the way. So I'm having to make up for that right here. But once I get this one row across, it becomes easier, and I'm able to take it back the other direction. And I know that a lot of people would say that doing the plaid, you can do it where you're just doing it back and forth across one strand, still going to the right. And you wouldn't have to go to the trouble of actually going all the way across like I did here. But at this point in this build, I knew that I wanted this little strip of plaid, but I didn't actually know how long I wanted it. And I needed to be able to actually see like how much of an effect this was going to produce for me. And so I did it this way, so that way I could kind of examine what was happening and determine like when this portion was finished, because I knew that I was going to go back to the other random stuff after this. And oddly enough, I got so excited about gluing the whole thing together that after this part, I never did get a photo of this. Just got really excited about this whole project and where it was going and what it was going to mean for me. And yeah, complete failure on my part. I mean, I really kind of, yeah, I don't know how I managed that one. But yeah, you can see going back the other direction. It's just a single knot. You're just joining the two together. And mind you, Going across this way, the plaid actually held together really nice and tight. It was, I think if I was going to do a plaid again, I would probably use this method. Yeah, it's more time consuming than a lot of other kind of knotting things, because you have to like grab those two strings that you're going to work with each time, and that's a little monotonous as opposed to like doing rows where there's 5 and 6 and whatever. But it still turned out pretty cool. It's nowhere near as noticeable as I thought it would be, mostly because there's just so many colors. But at the same time, it's still pretty cool. It's also kind of cool that the colors kind of, the way they sort of, if you picture like the string in the very center at the top, it was both going to the right and to the left. And this segment started where they actually came back together after bouncing off the corners and both coming inwards. So all these strings basically started this act right after those colors had both came back together again. So just a little side note that was interesting to me. Yeah, it wasn't like I actually intended to do that. It was just something that kind of, when it happened, I was like, oh, well, isn't that cool? And they all came together exactly in the same row. Like, so that was, I don't know. I found that fascinating. I don't know why. I just, it's, I guess, it's one of those math things that, it was predictable, but somehow I kind of missed that one. And yeah, discovering it was sort of really neat. What else can I tell you about this? Yeah, at this point here, I know that I'm really close, right? Because when I started that, like I said, I was 11 cm down, and yeah, I only had another like 4 or 5 cm to go. And here I am struggling with trying to get glue to come out of the stupid thing. Oh, to the right, you can see that was the template. How I did that was, well, how my wife did it, was she laid a piece of paper over top of the popsicle sticks and was able to kind of measure out the different little, like how long the whole thing was from the top going all the way around to the bottom, and cut it out to there. And then I sort of drew in the other little bits and then wrote in which side was the top, so that way I could really use it to be able to kind of figure out where the different segments are. You can kind of see from the bracelet down there, like where that plaid segment was, but that's like the closest thing to a photo of the whole thing. That photo card, that turned out to be the most useful thing that card ever produced. One of those, get a discount, you spend $100, they'll, you get to save $1 or something. I don't know. It was the most. But for spreading glue, yeah, it worked out great, man. That was awesome. So that's not me trying to be slanderous against, their policy or whatever. I mean, I guess if you're constantly buying camera gear, maybe it's something, but I mean, who spends that much on camera gear all the time? Just no. Use rubber bands to help hold this in place. Mind you, again, I did say I was pretty excited, right? If I had tied off those strings before trying to glue this whole thing down, this whole process would have been so much easier. But I got glue. I've got time. I'm gonna put it all together. Yay! Yeah, this was not well thought out on my part. I was way too excited, and it just, yeah, go figure. Turns out though, the white glue really works out really good for this stuff. Yeah, big huge rubber bands to kind of hold it on there. It kind of fell out of frame there, but yeah, look at that. Kind of press it on tight. It only took a few hours for it to really dry, I think, but I left it on there for a whole lot longer than just that. Okay, so once I was absolutely convinced the glue was going to dry, pulled it off, kind of checking it all out, And now came the tedious part. Basically, what I did for this was I pulled 6 strands together and tied that into a knot, knowing that underneath that little ledge was an area that nobody would ever be able to see and not a big deal. But again, I mean, if you look at this, this is just way harder than it had to be. I mean, I don't know what got into me. It's just like a child, I guess, just really just, I got so excited, it's Christmas time, but yeah, so then I figured out, like, after I got the knot in place, I might as well just cut those bits off because otherwise it's just more string getting in my way. But yeah, so that was that. Definitely recommend trimming it all off before you try to put it together. It would have saved me all this headache. Yeah, you can still see there's all of the templates that I made off to the side. So if I ever decided to do this again, I could. The only thing that really kind of mattered about the template itself was I wanted that little ledge area to be like 2 cm for the ledge. Other than that, it was, and I kind of wanted the back to have a certain kind of, I wanted the back to at least be like 7 cm tall. I mean, that was like the minimal. It ended up being a little bit longer than that. But that was, again, I mean, this is, if you're going to try to make one of these things, I would just say, take a look at the materials you have, take a look at where you want it to go, and you don't have to do it the way I did. I only have one little leg that holds it up, from tipping over and stuff. Thinking now, maybe I would have reinforced that a bit. Maybe I would have had a couple, 2 or 3, and the way that it staggers, right, then you end up cutting a piece that's a little bit smaller that you glue in between. But that would have made it more steady. So now I have to be concerned, like, what happens if I break that piece off, So, in hindsight, could I have done it differently? Could I have made it better? Quite possibly, sure. But I'm still really pleased with the end results, which you'll be able to see here shortly. Let's see, what else? Oh, yeah, you can see in the back there, I totally did not do a whole lot of sanding in the back or in that little back corner or anything. Just didn't need it. And I didn't go to any trouble of trying to roll the fabric around the edges and cover up the wood. From where it sits, nobody's ever going to see that. It wasn't necessary. And that was not a thing. And yes, it was always intended that the fabric would be wider than what the wood was. So that reminds me, what was the measurements of the wood? The wood was, I have calipers here. The wood is 9.5 cm going across. So yeah, there's kind of a bit overhanging off the edges. But again, it just gives it a cool effect. It's a cool look. Kind of just like the fabric just floating there, because you can't, from where I have it set up, you can't see the wood at all. It's just this chunk of fabric just happily floating, and I think that's pretty awesome. What else can I tell you that would be helpful to you at this point? Good scissors? Yeah, absolutely. You can tell my desk kind of got a little bit messy. That's partly the glue and God knows what else. I think maybe something I was eating there. But yeah, this was obviously a lot more messy than what I'm used to making. I haven't played with glue since I was a kid. So yeah, that's that was fun. That was interesting. Oh, keep tissues around, because otherwise you just find that you get glue all over your hands, and you need to be able to wipe your fingers off so that we are not getting it all over the fabric and making a mess of literally just everything. So that's probably some good advice, just having something along that's nice and easy there. There we go, last knot. This was a fun project. I would definitely recommend everybody should have one of these. So there you go. Okay, there we have it. This is it. And if you hadn't guessed by now, it is a card holder. And yes, I knew going into this that my cards were going to cover up a large portion of where the work was itself. But it's so basically how this all happened was the other day, one of the bags sold during my sale, and my wife asked me to go get one of my business cards to put in with it while we sent it out. And I actually had to get up and go find my cards, and I was like, I should just have some cards on my desk anyways, it'll look cool in the videos, and it'll just make it easier for me. But I didn't want some kind of, little acrylic stand or something. It should reflect who I am and what I do. And I think this does that. This shows something that I came up with on my own. You can see here's where the plaid came out, and this is why the measurement was taken to be that the top where the cards would be, where the cards would rest, and then this would be the segment where the plaid would go. Because I kind of wanted to try to make that become a visible thing. If I put it back in here or something, it would never be seen. So is it really that visible? Nah, not so much, but it is different from all up here, right? So, and why I think everybody that is serious about making bracelets should have something like this is if you ever set up like a booth or something, or do some kind of a public event, you're going to want to have your cards, right? That's a thing. And you kind of want to have things up there that people will notice and admire that they can't have. And what that does is it creates a sense of interest, and this thing, honestly, I can't even imagine what kind of price I would sell this for, because it took days. And because it's so expensive and because it's so unique and whatever, people will see that and say, wow, even if you're down to your last few bracelets, the ones that nobody else wanted, they weren't all that amazing or whatever, at least having something like this at your table will say that you are a person who is quite capable of making something special. And if they want a souvenir of me meeting the person who did that, then they're more than welcome to buy one of those bracelets that's left. This is just my theory. I've kind of seen it work in the past. I used to wear some pretty big, huge bracelets on my own wrist. And when people would ask how much, I tell them $75. Well, they didn't want to pay $75, but they had no problem paying $10 or $5 for something else that I had. So that's just the theory I have as far as how that goes. But yeah, I'm super, super happy with this. I'm going to very proudly have this on my desk, and I look forward to the next time I can go out to one of those public events, and this will sit on my table. And I kind of really like how the colors in here really kind of go well with my card. That's just a coincidence. I didn't deliberately try to find the same colors that were in the card. I just went with colors that I like. And turns out that's what's in my card. So hopefully you've enjoyed this whole project. I hope the people who are trying to guess from the community part of YouTube, I hope that this was a fun enough surprise, and I really had a lot of fun with your guys' guesses. There was a lot of neat stuff, although half of them I can't figure out what you thought the popsicle sticks were for, but whatever, that was still fun. So until next time, don't get your strings in a bunch.